Hello, Pauline. It is so nice to have you here.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here, Kathy. I have been anticipating and sharing this day with friends because I'm just excited to share and to inspire. So thank you for welcoming me today.
I can't wait to introduce you to my community. I often introduce people how I know them, and then I'm going to open it up to allow you to introduce people to how you share your genius with the world. But I marvel over and over again how the people just appear in my pathways at exactly the moment I need them. I often say it's the universe. Uh, I know that God is on my shoulder to help me on this path. And there's been a lot of moments on this path where I wonder, oh, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this what I'm supposed to be? And then all of a sudden, people like you pop into my life and say, hey, somebody told me that we should talk to each other. And I've just learned to say yes. And every time I do, I am really just blown away at how my life is aligning with somebody's, and how much inspiration comes from an interaction, even through the internet. I am a people person. I'd much prefer to be in front of you right now, physically, but I feel your energy even over the airwaves. So we met through a double kind of source. I have a dear friend that I went through my positive psychology program with. His name is Dan, and he connected me with his cousin who connected me with you. So it's one of these magical strings that keeps weaving in and out of my life. And you and I had a lot of similarities, not only in our work, but also in the life experiences that we have gone through. We have cancer in common, but I think we have a couple of other things. And what I saw in you immediately was that you radiated what I call post-traumatic growth, in that ability to just reframe our story, not forget it, but reframe it in a positive light. And I can't wait to dig down and talk to you about that. But before I do want to open up the floor so that you can share with people how you walk in the world and share your genius.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was so sweet. Yes, we do. We share a very common connective point. And I think of, back in the 80s or 90s, there was that movie where everybody is connected by 6 degrees or something. And they're
6
just so
degrees of
small.
Kevin Bacon.
Yes, that one. I used to think he was so gorgeous when I was in high school. And so I think of that in how God just puts people within our path that we continue to connect with. And I think of back when I was in organic chemistry and we used the modules and we started creating the different atoms and how pieces connected. And I see that in my universe. I too am a people person and like to touch and see and have that connection. And I believe that you and we do share so much more than cancer, that we have a spirit of positivity. And I believe in holistic healing, and that's mind, body, and soul. As a Christian, I do Christian interpersonal and inspiring motivational talk. Nutrition is my platform. I have a degree in dietetics and nutrition, and I use nutrition to help people to understand that we can heal, but we have to heal holistically. And just so when I introduce myself to people, I introduce myself as a Christian motivational speaker using nutrition as my platform, because nutrition, life comes down to we are what we eat. If I am in a negative headspace, I'm going to tend to eat negative food that has a negative impact on my body. If I am in a positive headspace, I tend to eat more positively, and that then in turn has a positive impact on my body. So I'd like to help people to live in that positive framework, because I believe when we think positively, when we surround ourselves with positivity, we have an overall positive impact, not just on ourselves, but on those around us.
Mm, I love that message because I think as a collective, we need healing, and it does start with one human at a time.
Right.
And that idea of you are what you eat, I've expanded that a few times in some discussions that I've had about actually what people are consuming. Um, and my mom, she and my dad during COVID, they were watching a lot of news. And then when I talked to her, she would repeat the news to me. So not only was she consuming it, but she was reliving it each time. And
Right.
I don't really watch the news at all. I don't even have a television. You
We
probably
don't either.
on
We
your
don't either. No.
so I would explain to her, Mom, you got to be really cautious about what you're taking into your body. Uh, and it's not just the food, right? It's what we're consuming, whether
Right.
it's news or
Food is
maybe.
always the end result. Food is the end result. That's the last thing that we take in. We first take in with our eyes, and we take in with what we hear. We take in with what we smell. The very last thing we do is we consume with our mouth. We use all of our senses first, and then oral intake is the last thing that we do. And I tell my clients continuously, surround yourself with positive influences, and it's going to be easier to make positive food choices.
Mm,
It is so true when we watch something that is upsetting, whether it's violence, it's traumatic, it's families being torn apart, the music that we listen to, even the beats of the music can be aggressive. Fantasia, as an example, has many different vignettes of music, and some are very melodic and inspiring and upbeat, and others are very heavy during storms, and the drums are beating and when the forest is on fire. And I remember as a child that traumatized me,
mm,
that it was so severe that we take that in, and then either we choose to eat and we eat something that is less than beneficial, or we choose not to eat. And either way, we're harming ourselves, but food is that end result of what we've taken in.
mm. I often talk about sense drenching, but I've never really understood that there is a hierarchy to it. And that makes perfect sense. So if what we're seeing and hearing, like if you're going in that hierarchy, then
Right.
next what goes in your mouth, I often think of, oh, I'm so drawn to comfort foods when I'm sad. Well, comfort foods for me, not my friends. It's all gluten. It makes my eyes all swollen. I know what it does to me. I know that it's harmful, but for some reason, it's the thing I still at age 55 will grab when I'm sad. I'm like, oh, a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese. Nothing like it. God, there's not 1 ounce of energy or nutrition in that box. But it's like it's traveled with me my whole life.
It's what you need at the moment to heal and to get to a more positive headspace. I had a conversation with a client yesterday who is currently living through some PTS experience and was very, very down on herself for emotional eating at the moment. And I had to remind her that that's what she knew at that moment to help her cope with where she was. And my job is to help her understand that, okay, so now we're going to eat a little bit less of the emotional food, and we're going to incorporate another food that has that same sense of sweetness. For her, it was sweets that can then take the place of part of it. And so we're working on baby steps, that
Mm,
it's okay to have the comfort food at the moment because that's what she needs to help recenter herself and to calm down. And that's our main focus, is helping her to feel safe, to feel secure, to calm herself down. And we, while she is working with her therapist, can work on changing the food habits. Comfort food is called comfort food for a reason.
yes. And I love this idea of actually using it as an opening to growth, using it almost as a gateway. Okay, acknowledge it's comfort food. You reached for it for a reason. I think it's Dr. Rick Hansen. He has this, have you heard of him?
Yes. Yes.
His heal process, that last L is the linking. So actually re-experiencing the difficult or the trauma, but allowing it to open that door to link to something new or in something different, and in that baby steps. But honestly, I've never thought about it with food and with your idea, which I believe is brilliant, that it all comes down to food and how we're nourishing ourselves. So when we're mindful on that level, huh, I could talk to you all day, but I really want to hear about your story. I want to hear about specifically about, I know that, and I think you and I are going to have multiple conversations. So this one, I'll focus on the cancer experience just because I know there's going to be more. But regarding your cancer story, you know, we all have one. And I often, in my narrative coaching hat, I equate it to how you became, how you're being, and how it's allowed you to become. So in that story arc, choosing wherever you want to be in that story arc, I'd love to hear about your cancer story.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm happy to share it with you. So I was married in 1990. Prior to that, I had gone to the Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, as a theater education major.
Mm.
And from 3 years at Western Michigan, ran out of money. I was awarded the court, so I didn't really have a great environment at that point. Went from Western after 3 years, funding ran out, moved to Ypsilanti, Michigan, got a job, and found my husband. My husband found me. It was one of those things where I wasn't looking. And again, as I've shared, I'm a person of faith. I said, God, if I'm meant to be, then you have to bring them to me, because I have no use, I have no want. This is like, I'm moving forward and trying to build myself a life. And so I met my husband in April. We were married in September. It was a very quick relationship, courtship. By February of the following year, I was diagnosed with stage 4 Hodgkin's disease and taken in for emergency surgery. They didn't even wait. Like, I was diagnosed, and then they said, tomorrow you're having surgery, and you probably will not live through this. Be ready to plan a funeral. Again, mind you, I got married in September, and this was February. We hadn't even taken a honeymoon. And I'm a very tenacious warrior. I do not believe in the word no. And I was also very foolishly young. I had just turned 21 that November. My husband had just turned 21. And, you know, there's a saying that God watches over fools and little children. And I think I was a little bit of both. And I was blessed with a very beautiful oncologist who took very good care of me. And I had a fabulous team between the thoracic surgeon and my oncologist at the St. Joe's Hospital in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that I think they recognized my age and the fact that it was my husband and I, and we were trying to figure this out. He was in college. I was working to support the two of us. And long story short, diagnosed terminally ill, told to plan my funeral. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen, but free to operate. So they operated. I have a 12-inch scar from the tip of my neck down almost to my navel, and they opened me up. The tumor had grown next to my heart, so they removed as much of the tumor as they could. It was about the size of a tennis ball, and they could not remove the portions that had grown near my heart. So then I had radiation treatment every day for 3 months. And at that point, they believed that they had gotten all of the cancer. Foreshadow, about a year later, we had been trying to have a child, and that did not come to fruition. And we continued to try. Eventually, we were able to have our oldest son. And after his delivery, my cancer came out of remission. And I was in a wheelchair and hooked up to oxygen for 3 years, told that I wasn't going to live again. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I fought to have this kid. Nobody else is raising my child. I'm going to do this. And my husband, God love him, he worked very, very hard, but he often had to work away from home because of what his job was. So I would put our baby in my lap, take the wheelchair to our minivan, load our stuff into the minivan. He went into the tumbling class at the YMCA. I would wheel my wheelchair over to the treadmill, get myself up onto the treadmill and got myself walking and reestablished my lungs. I have scar tissue from radiation is the problem. And so because of that scar tissue, I have a difficult time breathing, or I had a difficult time breathing. And I literally worked myself out of the wheelchair. It was tenacious determination that nobody else was going to raise my son. Forward now, I'm 52 years old. I run marathons. I run, I do 5Ks just as to stay in shape. So we can be what we choose to be while the universe may send things our ways that are difficult to cope with. There are times when not everybody does survive cancer, no matter how strong of a warrior they are. And when I say warrior, I don't mean Wonder Woman superhero with the little cute costumes. I mean, you're dirty, you're bloody, you're ragged, you're exhausted, and your sword is just bloody from the battle. And we don't all make it. And that doesn't mean that one person fought harder than the next person. I am not saying that whatsoever. I am saying that we step into it with the attitude of, I'm going to kick it. And we keep fighting until one of us wins.
Mm.
And I was very blessed that I am still standing.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I really do wish I was in front of you because I would love to give you a hug and just to touch you because I think you're a miracle. My goodness.
It's really, I think for me that it's what I needed to get me to really understand the value of my life. I came from a very abusive background, a very traumatic background of a childhood, and I did not value who I was. I had no sense of importance or self-worth. And when I understood that it was me and this disease and one of us was going to come out winning, I had to decide who that was going to be. Was it going to be me or was it going to be the cancer? And God gave me the child that I had prayed for years. And I finally had that answer to prayer in my arms, right? This is like, no, second time around with cancer, nobody's raising my kid. Bottom line, he was my gift. But he was a gift more than just as my baby. He was my inspiration. He was my purpose. And I found my value was worth fighting for because God wouldn't have answered my prayer with this child if there wasn't a purpose. And so I chose to love myself enough to fight with every breath that I had. And there were days when I really thought that was my last breath because I was hooked up onto oxygen. I couldn't breathe my own when I started out. But I was able to discover myself and take my love for theater and pair it with my faith and understand that nutrition plays a role in all of this. And I took that, and then my husband and I and our son went overseas as missionaries where I taught nutrition to people in the village because that was my gift that I could give. I could give me and my life experience to somebody else and how nutrition can help. And from there, it's just springboarded to my passion is just to inspire people, to empower and propel forward to be the best that they can be at this moment and into the future. Our past were opportunities to grow from. They're opportunities to find positivity and to choose to think of what happened in the past in a way that is going to inspire me for my future.
You just reminded me so much of there's this book about the Holocaust. It's by a Holocaust survivor. Her name is Eva or Edith. Edith, I think it's Edith Eva Edgar. And her book is called The Choice, Embrace the Possible. But there's a quote in there that I have on my desk, and it says, the psychology of freedom. And to me, this is what positive psychology is. It's allows the ability to heal our own lives. This psychology of freedom, understanding that it is in our own power and there is a choice. And I acknowledge, exactly like you, not everybody makes it through, no matter what choices they make. And there's a higher
Right.
thing at work here. But in any kind of trauma or traumatic experience, or hell on earth, there is choice. But I believe so much of our culture has been raised on this learned helplessness, which
Yes.
Martin Seligman talks a lot about in his beginning research on positive psychology. As you probably know, were these terrible studies with dogs that now would not be allowed, but really learning that when you keep hitting against the wall over and over, there's this sense of learned helplessness, which from that spawned this idea of positive psychology. And one of the offsets of that is post-traumatic growth, which is something I'm so fascinated by. And as you told me your story, I could identify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the post-traumatic growth elements that were innately part of who you are. But I'm going to read them to you, and I'd love to see if you can identify them for yourself, and then we can kind of talk about which ones were raised for you. So the first one is, and the first 5 come from Tedeschi and Calhoun's work in 1996, when the phrase post-traumatic growth was first coined. As you know, I'm just sharing this for our viewers. The first one is support or interpersonal relationships. The second is personal strength. The third one is spiritual change. The fourth is appreciation of life. And the fifth is new life possibilities. And then in 2012, our friend Kate Heffernan introduced 2 additional ones that had to do with the body. One was reconnecting to the body, and the other was creating new habits to support the new body. And then I've added 2 just for from my own personal research, but there's a lot of research out there. It's just not tied to post-traumatic growth yet. One is positive sexuality, and the other is emotions, or the permission to feel. So when you think about those 9, and I just realized I told you I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I actually have 6 for you. About what ones resonate with you?
So definitely the first 5 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love your last one, the permission to feel. For me, that was huge, because I was my brother and I were my mother's caregivers. My mother was severely mentally ill, and so we did not allow ourselves the ability to feel, because it wasn't always safe. And I had to learn to allow myself to feel, and cancer was kind of that springboard for me that started that. So I love that you added that. We're going to get that one put on the list. And I'm sorry, what were the two more?
The corporeal element, the body elements, was a reconnecting to the body and then creating new habits to support that new body.
Right, reconnecting to the body for sure. I remember that through when my cancer came back, it was about the same time that my mother passed away. And it was an opportunity for me to truly reconnect. And I went through post-traumatic stress disorder at that time, because a lot of childhood emotions came back flooding at her passing that I had not allowed myself to really resolve.
Mm.
I am a person that at that time, bury it, pack it down, move forward. There's a job to do. Let's get it done. Don't have time to deal with things. And so my emotions were things that were not really dealt with to that point. And at mom's passing, I learned to forgive her. And I learned that God love her. Her life was hell on earth. I thought my childhood was hard. My mother's was horrendous.
Mm.
My mother's life, my mother had multiple personalities.
Mm.
And she was trapped in her mind from a very young age in a very abusive situation. And so she was never free.
Mm.
Even on her best day, mom was never free. And I won't truly know my mom until we're both together again
Mm.
in passing. And I know where she is and I know who she's with. And she's in the best place that she has ever been because she's with our Lord. And I will be with her one day. But on earth, and as a child, you don't understand all of that. And so there was a lot of anger related to things. And so when mom passed and cancer came out of remission, had to learn to deal with all of that.
Mm.
And I also had to learn that these emotions are okay. These emotions are valid. I'm allowed to feel this way. And it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It is okay to feel cheated and robbed and that I had missed out on something. But it's not okay to dwell there. It's okay for me to accept it, to recognize it. But to live there devalues what my mom was able to give me. It devalued the gifts that she fought so hard with her own demons to give my brother and I. She kept us. She didn't give us up. She held on and raised us the best she could. And for what mom was living through, that was huge.
Mm.
We grew up in the 70s on $250 a month. That's what she got from disability. And she raised my brother and I on that money the best she could. And I love my mother, and I love her very much, and I respect what she did. So to live in a state of anger would be to devalue the gifts that she gave me and the gifts that I developed. Very tenacious. Don't take no for an answer. I fight for a cause that I believe in. It's a conviction for a reason. If I call something a conviction, because it's a conviction, I'm going to fight for it. So I learned a lot of great values growing up. And while my childhood may have been traumatic in different levels of abuse that I went through, it was also a fantastic learning tool that I could take into parenthood in ways that I chose to raise my children and not raise my children. And the ways that I can help others to see, you know what, but look at the value that you learned from it.
Mm. I'm looking at you and I'm just thinking you're too young to have had gone through all through this. You are just radiant, and I'm thinking you have so much hope. You offer so much hope. I think that's the first word that comes to my mind is just this enormous hope. And I know you trudged through absolute hell to get there. And I'm thinking during that time when you realized um, that it was okay to feel, that you were given permission to feel, what kind of support system did you have to encourage that?